If you're losing deals because lenders keep saying no, this conversation will change the way you work deals forever. Here's the truth. Banks rarely say no because of the borrower. They say no because the deal wasn't set up correctly from the start, long before underwriting even begins. Once you understand what lenders actually need up front, your deals stop dying. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Truth About Real Estate podcast. Today's conversation is one every agent needs because deals are falling apart more often than people realize, and most agents never get to hear why. Joining me today is someone who's seen real estate finance from every angle. He's overseen billions in origination, managed private debt portfolios for his family, offices, and institutional investors, and now directs a private lending platform at 1892 Capital Partners, helping brokers, investors, and agents structure deals that actually get funded. Charles Farnsworth, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with your journey. Walk us through your backstory.
Started right out of college, started fixing flipping homes, didn't have a lot of money. So next step is how do I find capital, right, to do that? And so I ran into a handful of private investors that would lend me money to purchase acquisitions. And then more and more people that I ran into and saw what I was doing wanted access to money. And I figured, well, why don't I put people together? Right out of college, started brokering money between private investors and real estate investors. And then I started a company that allowed me to fractionalize investors into larger deals because not all deals, some deals, they got to a certain size where it would be hard to fund by one investor. Continued along that path, and then I got into wealth management for about 10 years. I was in the middle of 2008, 2008, when the sky fell, if anybody was involved in real estate at that point. So I was unfortunate to be caught, but everybody else did. But, made it through that, found creative ways. After that, I went back to private lending. Private lending sort of vanished when 2000, in sort of the mid-2000s, because subprime lending became very institutionalized. There's lots of capital. It was very easy to obtain it. So there wasn't as much of a need for private credit. But when that all came to an immediate halt, I recognized immediately where there was going to be needs. And so I went back into private credit again and been in it since then and have seen it obviously mature and change dramatically. I mean, head spinning dramatically over the past 5 to 7 years, I'd say. So it's been a very fascinating space to be in.
So when you think about the market cycle since the beginning, 2008, what are you seeing changing and how are you guys adjusting the risks for today?
There was no capital when the sky fell, 2000, 2009. Private investors were sort of the place to go. People who had money that had some experience in real estate but wanted to put it out to get a passive return. The returns that those investors are getting back then were very high. There was no competition. And then I think what ended up happening is after the subprime sort of blowout, capital is always looking for a good return. And so after it got a little bit more comfortable again and it saw what private credit was happening in private credit, it became more institutionalized. We started with small balance real estate funds that would raise investor money and place that money in for investors. Then that turned into institutions and larger banks or financial institutions that were willing to now provide leverage to those small balance funds so they could actually leverage with investors and make these loans. And then they're turned into buyers, Wall Street level that were buying these loans. And all of a sudden you have an exit. What used to be private lenders turned into what I call originators. And there's a big difference, right? If you have, as what I call a true private lender, we're not driven by an underwriting criteria to the people we sell our loans to. Right. Once you start selling loans, there'd be these small funds that were very regional, maybe had $50 million to $100 million. They're placing in their market. The loan they made, they had a vested interest in that loan. If it succeeded or failed, it fell on their shoulders. As the market became mature and commoditized and securitized, those now, what I call fund lenders, turned into origination machines. They don't now hold the paper. They sell it. They borrow the money, they book it, and they sell it. What that ended up happening is it caused those regional companies, in order to maintain more volume, you have to go to other states, right? And so what you probably saw over the past 5 years is explosion. If you type in private capital, all sorts of things pop up. But the big difference is, are you dealing with an originator who is underwriting to a strict criteria, which is very similar to a bank, or have you stumbled across a real private lender who makes those underwriting decisions themselves and aren't governed by something else that they have to sell to. Right? And so there's been a big change there that I think has clouded what private capital and what hard money and what that definition used to be. DSCR loans are a perfect example, right? They're highly secure. They're securitized now. Everybody does them. I think Rocket Mortgage came out that they're now doing them, which used to be kind of just more of a private enterprise, which is now becoming more institutionalized. But they still sort of put this under the umbrella of private credit, but I don't see it. I almost without see it as almost subprime, just with a different name. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so when you think about this too, like, right now, like in the 2025 space, going to 2026, there's been a lot of people talking about how, like real estate agents in particular, talking about how they're not being able to get the right loans for their clients. And some of them need, especially for fix and flip construction, bridge loans, they need private credit. So, like, what are you seeing in terms of like lenders, filling their loans, and when does the agent switch over to private lending? And like, what kind of warning signs do you guys see that these agents need to know about private lending and about just original traditional lending?
I think I've been in the business a while. I understand traditional lending is very difficult to get. It's highly regulated. Generally for primary, people who are buying their primary home, you'll find most private capital cannot touch primary residences. So if you're an agent and you're trying to help somebody fix up their primary home to then sell it, or they're trying to maximize, the transaction in some way, that's going to be difficult to do. If you're an agent and you're representing people who are looking to get into the business of fixing and flipping homes, there's an assortment of different criteria that will give you access to different types of credit, because that has its own criteria. It's becoming more aggressive, but it would probably, and I'm happy to talk with anybody who ever wants to call me to ask me all about it so I can give them some direction. But effectively, understanding the animals in the zoo of private credit is important, right? And I would say they primarily fall into two categories, like I stated. One is going to be this 80%, which is now somewhat securitized. The guidelines are very clear. They'll tell you they need a certain amount of experience, certain amount of deals per year. They have to put a certain amount of money down. And then, how their draw is going to work if they're going to buy it and fix it. A lot of what I call fix and flip private lenders out there that are more on the origination and sell and securitization side, their underwriting is pretty clear. And you'll find that because it's now being securitized and bought, most people underwriting is the same way. It's almost, I wouldn't call it conventional, but it's similar. They fall into the same criteria, except it's sell to the same buyer. It's this paper, right? So that's one vein, and you could type in, look for private credit in your market, and you'll find direct originators that are doing that in your market. I can even refer you to some that are large. They're out there. They're not hard to find. The harder group to find is if your client doesn't fit into that criteria. They don't have the experience, let's say, or they don't fit that box. Now you have to find some sort of other solution for them, right?
So let's dive into a little deeper and talk about like what specific things you guys look for when you're looking to do a deal. So like, what's your main criteria you guys look for?
So we're going to look for what is the value of the property as it is now. And then I need to get an idea of what they're going to do to the property to get it to the value it's going to be. So we have as is value, which we need to know. We have a budget, which we need to know. And then we have what it's going to be worth when it's finished, right? And based on that, I'm going to be governed by loan to value. So I'm going to have a loan to value on my acquisition. So if you think about it, if you're going to lend somebody on a piece of property that is in a certain as-is condition that needs a certain amount of rehabilitation to get to a certain another value, if you're going to lend somebody that money, you're going to want to lend 95% or 100%. What percentage do you want to lend on that acquisition, right? We're typically, because we hold our paper and I don't underwrite to securitization criteria, I like people to bring in more money in the acquisition. That leaves me in a very non-competitive position because there's a lot of lenders right now that as is value that you're going to buy something, they'll lend sometimes up to 90% of that as is value, right? Which is pretty substantial. I mean, to buy your own home, you just got to bring in 3.5, 5, or so. You can buy investment properties right now with not a whole lot of money down, right? They'll lend you your rehab cost as well. So let's say you have $50,000 rehab costs you want to do. They'll lend you that. They'll provide it to you your client on a draw basis. So as I do work, they'll get a draw. As I do work, they'll get a draw to meet that. And then there's this, what's the finished value, right? And so it has to fit in that box. And your finished value, typically, they don't like to see more than higher than 75% loan to value. Okay. So there's like a formula that I could send to people. It's very basic, right? I always work my deals backwards. Like, what is it going to be worth today? What is it going to be worth finished? And I'll take 75% of that, and I'll back into that. What is it going to take to rehab it? I'll back out of that, and then I'm left with what I should pay for this thing. And and I know I'm not speaking more on the agent side, but on the investor side, the investor, there's always been this sort of this 75, 65, 70% rule on the exit value. Because if you're not left with that room when you're selling it, if you think about it, you got 10% sales costs. So even if you underwrite your deal and you have 65% loan to value when you're finished, that means you have 35% in profit for your client in that deal, right? But you got 10% sales costs, you have 6% commission, you have excise tax, whatever it is, you have other closing. So you take that off the top. So they're 25%. If you have any hiccup in the market and they got to sell or it takes longer to sell, they can burn up another 10% in carrying costs. So it leaves them with 15% margin, in a typical sale. If they can sell it faster or they come in a budget, they can make more. But there is a general rule. And the general rule I also tell people is just because a lender is willing to do it doesn't mean it's a good deal. That's like number one rule that a lot of people forget. If they think if they get a lender lend on it, that this thing's going to work. I always tell people watch out for that as well, because lenders are getting more and more aggressive, right? And they're underwriting to protect themselves, not necessarily to guarantee you're going to make profit. So you kind of have to remember that.
I think one thing too is like it's good to have a second pair of eyes, especially for example, you have an agent who's might helping you with invest in property, do a fix and flip, but you also have a lender, a private credit lender, who can help look at the guidelines for what they're looking for. And if your property falls within it, it's just a good second pair of eyes to say, okay, is this a good deal? What does lender think? What does agent think? What do I think as an investor? Can I actually do this? And how's the market timing right now? Like right now, even in the past year, things have been getting tougher and tougher, and the rates are so high, the insurance is so high, the construction is high. Everything you think takes like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, might take double the time to do it. Permitting costs, construction time, delays, the amount of workers available, and even inspections. So you have to kind of factor those in, and that's why I see lenders doing their due diligence, making sure everything kind of matches with forecast, and see what happens. And who knows, at the end of it, did you actually make money? Some people are selling just to sell.
Right. So a lender generally underwrites to protect themselves, but doesn't mean, like I said, guarantee you're going to make a profit. What we are seeing right now is there is a shift, right, in the market. Things are not moving as fast. I'd say prices are flattening or coming down a little bit. Lenders also at the time, depending on the lender, which is interesting because it really depends on who the end buyer is. If the end buyer can be convinced to make loans at 85%, then they'll do it and they'll be available to you. But again, that doesn't mean you'll make money on it, right? And we're more cautious on valuations. Once upon a time, lenders were being more aggressive because they thought rates were going to come down, and if those rates come down, those values will hold. So they're making loans in anticipation of that event happening. We don't like to do that. I've been in real estate long enough to know that you have to assume the more negative side when you're underwriting to be safe. It's just safer for everybody. But we hold all of our paper, so my motivation is different. Right.
Nice.
But I would tell people expect things to take longer, expect things not to sell as much, and expect things to cost more. Like you said, you have to take those into consideration.
And I think that's why a lot of agents right now and investors are being more cautious about the deals, and they're really looking hard for really good deals that make sense. And even then, sometimes they're like, am I really going to make, like minimum 50K, 100K, 150K profit after all this work? And is it really worth the time? Some people you see flipping all the time, they might be doing bulk volume. They're like, okay, I'll just make 50K per deal. But the goal is to just keep my construction people going so that when the market shifts, I can actually keep employing them rather than losing them to other investors.
That's a good point. That's what I find a lot of my clients do as well, even builders. I have a client that right now that he doesn't need to build. He could probably sell his lots right now and make just as much or the same as if he actually went vertical with them. But he wants to keep his people employed, right? Because he knows it's going to change. And if he loses those people, then he won't be able to ramp up when things become more opportunistic. So he's come to us. We're gonna help him vertical build, but it's largely keep his people busy.
How about if you're a new investor? Hey, I'm a new investor. I want to start investing in fix and flips, and I don't have any background, portfolio, construction crew. How do I get a private credit?
So groups like us will do that. So I'm going to have a fairly substantial interview process with the client. The requirement I might have is that they have a little more cash, right? Which is hard because when people get started, they really don't have a lot. What I typically recommend for most people who want to get into this business, first find your first handful of deals until you have sort of a working treasure trove, is to partner with somebody. There are investors out there. When I started, and when a lot of people who I know first started, it's the 50-50 rule, right? Hey, if you'll put up the money, I'll find it. Let's split the profits 50-50, right? If you can find a handful of private investors like that, which sometimes are friends and family and other people you actually know, right, that'll help you with your first deal, whether they help you put the money down that you're going to need, but you're going to have to split it with them. You know what I mean? I've split something with them. That helps give you the experience. If you're borrowing from somebody you know that's not a debtor and it takes a little longer, you're not as much as risk of actually losing money on the deal. You and your partner might not make as much money, but you're not under what I call our debt pressure, right? You have essentially effectively an equity partner. And equity partners, they're easier to work with. They're generally more liquid. Yes, you got to give more money away, but the pressure's off. And as this new person, that pressure can be very difficult. Timelines and budgets. And so I always recommend, I mean, if you have enough cash on your own, but you don't have the experience, and so a lender won't lend to you, we do take on clients like that. That's how I started. So I'm not afraid. But I'm going to pay much better attention to the budget. I'm going to question them more on their timelines. I'm unlikely to going to listen to them as much as I'm going to go with how I feel this is going to unfold. And I may want them to have a little more cash on the side in case things don't go as planned, that I know that they can afford to handle that, essentially.
Yeah, and I think too, like going into your first deal, it's really a good idea to find a good partner, not just anyone on the street who can just breathe and has some money, but like really try to go vet other people, like dating, for example. Go find the right person that has the right fit with you and has the right goals in mind, and partner on the first deal. Do one partnership at a time, so that way you can start seeing what works, what doesn't, how you guys work together, and continue moving forward. And if it's not the right fit, that's great. You did what you did, you learned a lot through that deal, and then you work on the next deal. The first deal is not the make it all end all deal. It's the learning part of the process, and getting started makes a huge difference. When I first started doing some investments and I wanted to go out of state investments, I couldn't get a loan because there's like, you don't live in the city, you don't have any contacts, you don't have all these things. So and I was going for like 15 to 30 unit buildings. Didn't make sense. Well, actually, what happened is a better part. I became an investor syndicator, and I built my own company. And then we went to 150 units, 300 units, 750 units, and did investments that way. It was actually easier for me to get big investment loans versus getting small loans because I work with other partners, JV, joint ventures, and build it together with some background experience. And at the end of it, it's way more fun. You make a lot more money, and you can grow from that part of it, and you build your portfolio. But in the beginning, you do need to build a portfolio with someone who has existing relationships, existing deals, ownership, and a proven track record. It makes it easier.
That's a really good point. I think people underestimate the power of networking and getting to meet people. As you know, again, partnerships are really important. So finding that good partner doesn't happen immediately, and you get into an awkward partnership, and it's not fun when their expectations aren't clear. And I think what's important when you're looking for a partner is what I call the fairness factor, right? Like you and I are sitting across from each other and we're working a deal, and there's an extra penny on the table. Like, is it in the middle where we're trying to push the penny back to each other, or is somebody always grabbing for the penny, right? If you can find a fairness factor with the investor, things naturally work out, When that fairness factor is in there, you're always feeling somebody's always reaching for something, and it doesn't feel fair and it doesn't feel good. And I think real estate, if you're really interested in like you are and you've been in your life, it's a long-term game, right? And if you meet the right people and the right investors, they generally run in circles with other people, so they can bring in people they can help. It's really important to think about the long game and the people you meet.
So right now, too, in private lending, when are you seeing deals fall apart, and how do you see agents who have that kind of background experience to guide those clients so that the deal doesn't fall apart? What are they doing differently?
I think approaching the deal properly, so having a general understanding of what the deal needs to look like before you go in. If you have no experience and you go in, generally the box is gonna cut you off every time, right? And the other thing you're gonna find is if somebody brings a deal and doesn't fit, and then they come back, what if I do this? And well, what if we do this? And what if we do this? Lenders have a tendency to get a little fatigued. They get a little worried when they're always trying to make it fit, right? So you're best coming in with it fitting in the box, because then a lender is going to feel confident that you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about, you understand where they're coming from. And so I think that requires agents to get to know some private lenders, right? And that's a nice thing they talked about right now. If you are in that process, 80% of them are going to be very similar, right? So if you can understand the box, 80% of your deals should fit with somebody. out there. It's the 20 sometimes want to get more creative. Those investors are a little harder to find. But if you start with the 80, you'll eventually find some in this, and then this part of your portfolio and contacts will grow. But it's good to start here because there is quite a bit of capital out there for fix and flips. We used to do a lot of those before they got securitized and before the market became what I consider more institutional. And now, so we are actually moving away to target other opportunities where it's not so competitive, where the underwriting actually makes me sometimes a little uncomfortable.
Do you have any examples of deals that actually were about to fall apart, but you guys and the agent were able to help the investor save the deal?
Yeah, so I think from our side, because we play in this 20% category, that's what we get. We get deals that didn't make it over here for some reason, right? And so I have to get creative and find a way to make it work. I think the best example for that is when we're getting into new types of deals that we don't understand very well, like we did a car wash. We don't know much about car wash. How do you underwrite a car wash? Client came to us, never done a car wash before, so but they're strong. They're just being turned down by their bank because they've never done one before. So how do you become an expert at underwriting a car wash? Well, you hire a feasibility consultant and you make that part of the underwriting criteria, right? So if you have a good private lender that is truly what I call private, not governed by a box that's set by somebody else, they're going to help you find ways to do the deal. They understand their role. Their role is for whatever reason you don't fit in this 80. So we have to identify what that is, and then we got to mitigate around it, right? So I like when agents, somebody brings them a deal, goes, hey, we've looked at these other places and we're getting shut down for this specific reason, right? Can you guys help us with that? And so I look at what the reason is, and if I find sometimes that there can be some sort of mitigation to mitigate that risk, that why that other lender turned it down. And that other lender turned it down not because they're not finding a way to mitigate the risk. They're turning it down because it just doesn't fit their underwriting criteria in the box and the agreement they have with the people that they sold these loans to. They can't make those adjustments a lot of time. It's just they can't do it. It's in a box, right? And so if you find the right private lender, they'll help you find a solution. And if they can't, then there's generally something that they can't mitigate if they're comfortable. It doesn't mean somebody else might not be willing to.
Right now, you think about it, like most agents, they never get to hear stories like this, right? And this is like where the learning really happens. And you think about private lending like that's going on right now, with all the changes, it really comes down to the right fit and making sure people like agents, team leaders, brokers do your due diligence and really look out for. There's not just one person who does it is yes or no answer. It's really about you doing the due diligence to find the right person who can say yes and understand at each level why it makes sense. What are they looking at differently? How a real private lender is providing that information, that value, and helping you get your client to the right goal, which is investing in their property, right? Even for me, as a previous lender, I went through a lot of deals and saw how agents were working, what worked for them, and how they're getting investments. Some of them said no, and like the no is just because they're in a different box. If you go outside of that and follow other guidelines or exceptions and understand what you're doing and structure the deal correctly, you can actually help your investor make a lot of money and do a lot of good investments. I went through deals where I actually went to the CEO level and got to when the normal loan officer says no, underwriter says no. I'm like, this does not make sense. Let me go talk to the CEO of the company, even a big national company. And they go, okay, we'll do it. So
I think perseverance is important. And I think a lot of it, you got to be kind of fearless, right? You can't be ashamed to say you don't know things. You got to be willing to call people and say, hey, I need some help. Speak to me like my 5-year-old. What do I need to do? I think it's important to find people who will help you. I love what I do. So a lot of times I'll just talk to people and nothing will come out of it, but I'll help guide people or help them understand certain things. I'm a big believer in pay it forward. Something else comes out of that, being like that anyway. But I think the challenge agents will have is if you go look for that expertise from somebody, it's not always easy to find because this industry has evolved. The private lending side has evolved where there's a certain degree of specialization. You'll call somebody in the 80% and they don't even know anybody on the 20%. They're groomed to sell this fix and flip loan for this one institutional company. They have their clear underwriting. If you ask them for anything more, they don't have time to tell you, or they have to move on to the next deal. Their motivation is to close deals, not teach people a lot, especially if it doesn't fit in their box, right? And some of them have come into the industry in that position, so they don't really have the vast knowledge and many years of seeing evolution and how different things really are, nor sometimes even the subtle nuances. So I think And I acknowledge that's a challenge, finding somebody who will actually help you do that. There might be some organizations out there, Association of American Private Lenders, APL, that we're involved with. They specialize in private lending and private loans, and there's memberships, and they can help you sometimes do it. There's some other companies out there that will help brokers and agents place deals or help steer them a little bit, and they're on like a subscription model. Everybody's trying to find ways. I mean, that's what's nice about the industry. It's maturing. So as it matures, there's more services around it. But right now, it's highly fractured too. So somebody who can help that be the intermediary would be nice, because it's hard to know everything, right? So if I'm an agent, I'm in this space, I think I'd look at, okay, what is my defined market? Like, what am I going after? Am I going after single family residence investors, or am I going after land development pieces, or what's my specialty, right? Because you also find there's private lenders in each of those buckets, right? But to know and be an expert in all of those buckets and then say I can do it for everybody is really hard to do. Sometimes you get a little spread thin. So if you can identify what you want to focus on to start, sort of become an expert in that vein, which means get to know those private lenders, get to know their underwriting criteria. Don't be afraid to call and learn about it. I know a lot of agents don't like to talk money part, but that's like what makes the deal work. You gotta and not only that, it puts you out as an expert to your clients, right? You're trying to get more clients. They're going to come to you. You have to be that teaching tool, or the hub of the wheel to get them to all the right resources if you want to help close deals with them. And if you can be that person for them, that's a great deal of value, right? So they're more likely to stay with you and continue to work with you, because if you can find them money and find them the deal and sell them. So you come in as, hey, I think we should buy this as is, right? This is the value I think we should get it at. Yes, you don't make as much money on the as is buy, because generally it's lower. But then part of you set the expectation with them that, I'm going to help. You need to set the expectation with your clients that being an investor-based client is not easy, right? You're building your business on the fact that you're going to chase clients that are going to do repeat business, not an end home buyer who's going to buy every 7 to 10 years. Right, so you're shifting your model to be an expert to those people that will come regularly, but letting them know and setting the expectation that, hey, if I help you buy this, will you list it with me too, right? Because I'm going to help you with the as-is value. I'm going to help you come up with the ARV value. I'm going to look at your budget too. I'm going to look at your budget and find out what you're going to do to the property, because I need to know what you're going to do to it to assess what I think I can sell it for. And if you're good at coming in with the as-is right and good at the exit value, they'll be clients for life. Because that's, if you can make their numbers work and make their numbers reality, they're going to make money. And in that process, if you can help them place money and find money and do all those things, which allows them to do more work on the project, is do more projects, you become an expert. And therefore, those clients stick with you and they'll keep using you, and they're repeat clients. And so but it's hard to start to build that business. But if you commit to it, long term, it pays off.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Actually, makes really good points there. As an agent over 19 years, I went through many different cycles, and I found all the different types of real estate you can do into residential, commercial, investing, syndication. And it really comes down to the agent understanding, like, what are you passionate about? What do you really dive into, think, breathe, sleep, and you want to do? Do you want to do residential, just helping people buy and sell normal houses? Do you want to do commercial? Or do you want to do investments, fix and flips? Or you want to become a syndicator? All of them are different, and to become an expert, you really got to dive in, get to network with people, see what's going on in the industry, dive deeply into it, and then be able to take that advice and information and share it with your clients so that you can properly help guide them. And, throughout training all these real estate agents I've seen, many are successful when they pick one vertical and really go into it. And right. If your vertical is, investing, fix and flips, private lending, really get to know people like Charlie, and understand how you can help your clients and really learn how to focus on the numbers. Like, one of my goals before was I was an agent and a real estate investor when I started since 24. I joined the lending side too for a few years, just to really dive deep and understand the back end processes of it, so that I can help more investors have a better discussion with private lending, with other creditors, so that they can make smarter decisions. And that really helps in the information you're giving us. kind of guides them along that way. So where does private lending fit in today's real estate landscape? Like, in how do you see it playing with like insurance rates going up, people not getting policies? There's certain requirements such as new roofs, new electrical panels, removing knob and tube wiring, fire hazards, and like certain whole entire areas that you can't even get insurance. You have to use like California Fair Plan. Like, what do you see going on?
We have some of those insurance concerns as well up here, but there's largely due to fires and things like that in certain areas. Again, private capital can help an investor that wants to go in and make those changes so they can bring the property up to proper code. So a conventional, they can sell it to what I call retail, right? The homeowner. I think once upon a time, like if I was an agent, there'd be this market where, if we just do these certain things with the house, we can then sell it for you. But the problem is it's a primary home, and that's where it becomes like there is no gap solution for that right now that I'm aware of. Because once you turn somebody's primary home, the regulations become amazing, to say the least. It's almost, to make small loans, it's almost cost prohibitive because of the regulations are so high. So I wish I had a clear solution for that, but I don't. So an agent who's found somebody who really needs to sell their house, but we need to fix an knob too, we need to do certain things to it, we need to get it up so I can get you good value, but that's their primary home. I don't. Sadly, I think there should be, but I don't have a solution for that. It's only the person that wants to come in and speculatively fix it and sell it as an investment that private capital can help. So I think that's the most important thing that agent can identify when you're looking at private capital. It cannot be a primary home. It just doesn't work, doesn't comply.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense there. Do agents commonly like misunderstand more so about private lending right now?
I think a lot of agents they think maybe it's complicated. It's actually not very complicated. And I think if you're even thinking about using private capital, it also means that you're choosing to step into the investor side of the transaction. I know for a fact investors like to work with agents that understand what they're going through. And so, again, I recommend agents interested in chasing that type of business, just start calling private lenders, understanding what their programs are. You call enough of them, you'll see a clear pattern of what the buckets look like and what the requirements are. It's not as complicated as people think. And I also encourage realtors who want to chase that side is go do one yourself. Go do a fix and flip. That's how I started. I was doing fix and flip. So to fall into this role, I understand what everybody, and I still build new houses every once in a while. I still do fix and flips every once in a while because it helps me understand what's going on in the market, helps me understand what other lenders are doing, and I can speak intimately to anybody who wants some advice, and I can share things I've done that were right and things that were wrong and try to give them best practices. But I think that's part of the benefit of being a real estate agent that's getting involved in the investment side is to be one, or immersing yourself in it, become an expert on it. That becomes another line, an opportunity, revenue, and a future for those agents that aren't just, it's a whole, I've had agents who started doing that for other people. Now they just do it for themselves. They have now become the investor. They might do something on the side a little bit, but that's now their primary mode of business. And they learned through doing one or two themselves, helping other clients, learning a way to find good deals, giving them to clients, keeping some good deals, the really good deals for themselves. It's fair, right? You're out looking for good deals constantly. But it's an exciting business on this side. But I'd help agents and their clients get into a deal, structure the transaction, help them structure the purchase and sale. This is when properties are flying off the shelves, right? And everybody wants to hold on to the deal. So I would literally help them hold on to the whole thing, take 3 to 6 months to find a house, getting ready to close, and they go, oh, somebody's offering, Rocket Mortgage is offering me like an eighth off on the rate. Can you beat that? I'm like, no. And then they go, right? And so that's hard for me. I like to help people, and if I help and do that, I like to be compensated for that. And so I put myself more of a value add position where I'm needed. And if you are immerse yourself in the business and you know a lot about it then you become that needed thing, right? That's difficult to replace. It's not worth replacing for an eighth of a point or a half a point because they help me make money on every deal, multiple, yearly, constantly. And so you build this valuable relationship that's based on value, not based on price, essentially.
Yeah, I definitely understand it too. I think a lot of people, investors, they're always like, how do I save here? How do I cut commissions? How do I reduce the rates? How do I just find a better pricing? And they don't factor in all the knowledge that you're sharing with them, the guidance to get the deal done and to do it properly and to help them make more money at the end of the day. There are a lot of rate shoppers out there, and I'm sure a lot of loan originators, private creditors kind of like worry about that. And it's a lot of headache because you put all this effort into them. And to save an eighth of a point just because someone else can just beat your rate, that's why they look for more lower clients, lower agents, and ones who want to do deals and not burn the bridges. And once you burn the bridge, it is harder to come back. And you just rate shot me for eighth of a point. What was that? A couple $1,000? Is that to your benefit?
Right. But they're like, I buy the house every 5 to 7 years, so I don't care. I'm never going to talk to you. So if you deal with these, they're like, I got to call you tomorrow for another deal, right? So it's a different world on this side of the fence, on the investment side of the fence. But it's not for everybody. You have to love the business. You have to love everything about the business to be on this side of the fence. If you love to sell, then listing and being a buyer's agent and home buyers is different. It's different personality.
Like, what shifts are you seeing in lending space right now? In traditional lending, private lending, what's going on?
I'm seeing a lot more capital in the market, and therefore it's becoming more diverse and even more fractured. I'm moving a little out of the single family fix and flip space because there's so much money there. That doesn't mean it's a good time to be in that space. It's readily available. You can understand the underwriting and you can help your clients into that space. What I'm seeing is just more private capital than I've ever seen before. I'm seeing rates that don't reflect what I would consider private capital. When I was in this business, we first started, we were making 24% a year on the money. And then it came down to 18, now it's down to 16, now it's down to 14. So now I'm seeing deals that are being earned for a lot less. And so that tells me there's more money, there's more competition, there's more leveraging going out there everywhere in every industry. In investments, they're being levered to get higher returns. And lending, those loans are being levered to get higher returns. And so there's a lot more capital, there's a lot more money. And so it's a good time to be in the space if you're an investor, but I'm not really sure the long-term ramifications are going to be on that, just because if money's too cheap and the risk isn't properly addressed, anything that's levered that way, if there's a hiccup, the leveraging can cause a very large spill down, like I wouldn't call it a collapse, but it can cause a substantial amount of problems.
So what do you think right now? For example, when you look at the market and you see that like the rates have been pretty high over the last couple of years, it's been relatively really high, where the market has softened. There's not that many properties out there for sale, so you have really low inventory. And the fact that like you see all these jobs right now, all the reports every single month of job losses, and just like all the big companies are laying off. AI is coming more into jobs. And what do you see happening with that in lending?
I think it's a good time in the market to buy and hold. Like if you want to buy investment properties to hold on and rent. Obviously, we're going through some overbuilding in some places. We're seeing some rents coming down now. Unemployment could drive that down. So you want to be conservative. The speculative fix and flip market, to me, we're seeing, or at least I'm sensing, a fundamental shift in the philosophy of what it is to be a homeowner in the United States. Right? Part of the American dream was to own a home, have a family, and I think that created stability and strong communities, and that's changing. It's changing. You're seeing articles on lifetime renters. It's not worth buying. The question then becomes, well, then how do you buy something that you're going to rent to somebody if, does that pencil? I think it's a little bit of a challenging time to be in real estate right now, at least in our market. I'm in Washington State. I don't know what's going on in like Georgia and some of those other markets. I think there might be a little more opportunity in Detroit or, whatever's going on in some of those other different markets. So I think where you are, what region you're in, highly dictates where the opportunity lies. A lot of people, I think, got into this business over the past years because you threw a dollar on the wall and it turned into $2. It was hard to lose money in real estate for a while. But we're definitely coming into that season where you can lose money in real estate. And the scary thing about that is, I've used this analogy before, real estate's like poker. When you're in, you're all in, right? You could lose so much where you can't get back on the horse, and now you got some serious problems, right? So I think it's a complicated time to be in real estate. I can't foresee what's going to happen in the single family market. Prices are too high. People aren't selling. People are locked in. I don't know what it's going to take. People say lower rates. They're looking at 50-year mortgages now, and I don't think that's a solution. I think that's trying to fix a symptom of a larger problem. And I don't have a solution for that. I really don't. So my response is, You got to be more careful than ever. You have to be more conservative than ever. If you're in this industry, I've always coached people to, if you're going to get in this business of fixing and flipping homes, be a contractor too.
Yeah.
Meaning go do work for other people too. If you were in this business over the past 5 to 7 years, you could be a deal to deal business model. I'm going to live deal to deal. I'm going to make money deal to deal. But you don't want to be forced to buy a deal to make your payments. That's a precarious place to be, and ultimately you're going to make a bad decision, right? Because you're not motivated. Your fear starts to slip into your decision-making process about how I got to pay my bills. I'm just this deal's a little thin, but I think I can sell it for this much. I really think rates will come down, so I could probably get a 5% bump on it when the rates come down. That type of stuff can make you play a really bad hand.
I agree with you on that one.
And so it's challenging. But as an agent, and you're looking for that investor that you want to represent, you're literally betting on a horse. You want to bet on an investor that you think is going to succeed, that you think is going to come back over and over again. So your motivation should also be in trying to find them the good deal to keep them in the business, because if they do a bad deal and they're out of business, they ain't coming back to
They're
you
out.
for any business, right? So it's tough though, because agents got to pay their bills too. I don't have any good solutions for that. I was a deal to deal operator at one time, and I realized that was kind of scary. So that's why I started pushing some money and then doing deals. And then I realized, wow, I'm pretty good at pushing money and engaging investors and doing that. So I started doing more of that, but I still do deals. But now I work for a family, and that's all I do. I help them with a lending fund. But I still do deals. When you're a serial entrepreneur and you're an agent, you just have to have a lot of things in the fire.
I agree with you. You got to make sure it keeps burning, and you got to find the right one.
And therefore, you got to have the passion, because the only thing that keeps that fire fueled when things get tough is just a general passion and interest in the business.
A quick rapid fire before we wrap up.
Yeah.
What's one mistake you see agents making again and again with financing?
It's about time, right? You only have so much time, and there's only so many deals. So I think, again, the biggest mistake they make is they don't understand. They chase a deal for an investor, and they don't assess their investors' understanding of what it is to get financing. If understanding what the investor's financing is and understanding the practicality and realisticness of that really happening, I think is important. So I think it's important to know the finance side. Or else what ends up happening is you go after a deal, think it's a great deal, client has no ability to finance a thing. You then lose it to somebody else, or you're scrambling to hold it together at the last minute. And I don't think you want to be there. So I think arming yourself with knowledge in advance, not being afraid of understanding the financial side. Again, I'm encouraging people to look at it because it's not that complicated once you get what it consists of it. The formulas are really simple. I mean, I used to do, when I used to have clients come in who've never done it before, I'd sit down with a piece of paper, draw 3 buckets, and the equation's really simple. What's it going to be finished? What's the budget? What's it as is? Certain percentage of what you can do dictates a purchase price. If you can't get it for that purchase price, walk away.
Yeah. And if every agent changed one thing they approached to learning about lending, what would it be? I think you just talked about right there, what you just said, right?
Yeah. If you choose to be on this side of the fence, you need to know it all. So if you don't have a natural desire, I mean, I think about it all the time, right? I don't have to I really got to know what his financing piece is if I'm going to be, I have a natural drive to want to know. You need to be a learner. You need to want to know. You need to be passionate. And if you can't, it's going to be hard, because there are people who are, and those agents will excel. You know what I mean? But you don't need to be a master of it. You just need to have knowledge. And I read something the other day that it's not hard to obtain a skill. You may not become a master at it, but you don't need to be master in this business to be successful. You need to have the skills. And so they say anybody, you spend 10 hours on anything, you can gain the skill, right? So go out and get the skills. Don't be afraid you can't fail getting a skill. You may fail being a master. I know what every lender is going to do out there. I know what everybody bucket's going to. You don't need that.
Yeah, definitely. What's one coming change in lending that you think will impact agents the most?
I don't know. There's a surprising amount of capital out there. And so if you go out, if you've been in this side of the conventional lending, listing, and you come out this side, it's vast. It's vast. And so that's the biggest change I see. I expect it to continue to be pretty vast for a while until some black swan event happens of some sort. But I don't see it changing until something material impacts it. And that's my concern.
Yeah.
But I think underwriting is getting a little looser. I think there's more leverage. I think they're more what I call originators or lenders that are making money on the transaction, not on holding the paper, not on the success of the loan. And so ultimately that comes to roost someday where all the loans made just aren't working out or there's a hiccup and they were underwritten too aggressively. And when that happens, capital will dry up fast
I think one
because
thing
it's levered. So if it's levered, then it shuts down really fast.
I think one thing for me I see right now in the market that concerns me is getting the right insurance, making sure the property, the location, whether it's in a fire hazard zone, whether the building's old and needs a lot of maintenance and care. It worries me because insurance policies, especially in California, have been changing. For example, residential has gone from 2,000 to maybe 4,000. Commercial apartment buildings have gone from 8,000 to 30,000. And a lot of
Yeah, and those are one of those like unmitigatable things, right? You can't. So what ultimately is going to happen is values are going to come down, right? That's what has to, and that but that's needs to happen anyway. Real property tax, insurance costs, and just where values are. Period. It's unaffordable. I don't know how that's going to work itself out.
Yeah, I think
I don't see a happy outcome. The only outcome there's only two outcomes. Rates need to come down or values need to come down.
I think a good example is this too. Here's a quick scenario. A buyer wants to buy a multi-unit building. The building has an old roof. It has not been too boring. It has fuse box panels. Well, a buyer can't get insurance for it because the insurance company will say, well, you can't have fuse box. You can't have not been too boring. You need a new roof. The seller says, I can't afford to pay for these things. They can't get private credit to fix their residential property they own or occupy, and they're kind of stuck in a boat. And like, how?
That is so if somebody can. So I'm all about part of our business model and why we remain lean and nimble and why we don't get into that big bucket of boxes is we like to look. If you build your business on the box, your only way to be better is become more efficient or be more aggressive. If you're over here, then you can look for the what I call credit gaps, and credit gaps are always moving. It depends on what's going on in the market. Office space values go low, so you can't get money there. And so now there's an opportunity in office space if you want to take the risk. When rates went really high, all of a sudden, 300, 400 basis points overnight, money for land development disappeared, right? And all the money went to fix and flips. And so we went to land development, made a lot of those loans, and now single family fix and flips are easier the money is more available there. So we're always looking around. That's what I consider an opportunity if somebody can figure out how to build a product around that's compliant. Because I think there are people that want to get other homes, but they got to bring up to a certain code, or they're going to take a big discount on it, right?
Exactly.
So I don't know if I've seen, well, but the problem is I've seen that more again on an investor property. Yeah, I'm from Hawaii originally, and when I went home, I've been back and forth, worked up here, worked back at home. But when I did go back home after I came out of real estate, when things dropped, and I saw that big up. There's a lot of older homes that are just gentrified. Older people living there. They don't have the income to go get a loan, right? Because they're retired. They want to sell their house, all their equities in it, but their house is now dilapidated. They can't fix it up to sell it, so they end up getting, I use the word cautiously, preyed upon by somebody who can then go get the opportunity that they were unable to capture. I think the only thing that some people can do is maybe get a reverse mortgage. If you're in that bucket, if you're an older person, unless you already have one, so I don't know really what you have, but you can get a reverse mortgage for something like that. You don't need to qualify. It's in the equity in your home. It's your primary home, so you can do it, and you can take that money and you can fix your house up and then sell it and get out of your reverse mortgage. But for somebody who's not in that, who fits in that age category, I don't know. And it's sad because a lot of people buy their homes with the expectation to be able to make something on it or get their money back out of it.
Yeah, hopefully they'll be able to work with great agents who can help them, guide them through this, connect with the right lenders to make it happen.
Maybe you can find a contractor. I mean, that's finding a contractor that'd be willing to do it on contract, like they get paid when it gets sold. But then the contractor's effectively lending the money, but they're not a lender because they're just saying I'm willing to be paid later for the work, and they're going to get a larger fee, whatever you might call it, for that. But there's got to be a way to do it, and I would hope somebody could find a way because a lot of people have a lot of their savings caught in their home.
Charles, this has been incredible. Where can people connect with you or learn more about the work you're doing?
You can feel free to put my number out there, 253-592-3452. My email is charlesf@1892capital.com. If you just looking for guidance or something, be happy to help. Just leave me a message or leave me an email because I may not get back to you right away, just depending on what my load looks like. But, I'm here to help. Try to help as much as I can.
Most deals don't fail apart because buyers. They fall apart because agents are never given the visibility into what lenders truly look for. And when you understand what matters up front, don't close more deals. You become the agent clients trust for life. If you want to become the agent who never worries about deals flow again, the agents clients turn to for clarity and results, check it out at agenthehustlenetwork.com/accelerator. Also, link in the description below. Master this in the next 12 months for your business. Will completely look different. Thanks for tuning in to the Truth About Real Estate podcast. We'll see you guys in the next episode.